One of the things when I think about Trump, I mean, there's so many things that I think you would agree that he's been a disaster at. But I think one of the things we have to give him credit for is these really catchy phrases like lock her up, you know, boots for cash, Russian money for American soldiers. I mean, there's just any number of catchy phrases that the Trump administration, and specifically Trump, I mean, he has this amazing ability to kind of on the fly come up with the most catchy, like earworm phrases that just stick with you. I mean, should we really fault him for that?
Uh, no, I mean, I think people do give him credit for being a good marketer of himself, uh, and of sort of creating playground taunts. Like, I guess that's a skill that a 73-year-old man should have. I guess
Playground
it's an
taunts.
unusual skill.
You think playground taunts is a good skill for a 73-year-old man?
It wouldn't be at the top of my list for things I need from grandpa, but okay.
Grandpa, come in. Can you taunt your grandchildren? That's great. I mean, listen. I mean, if nothing else, it'll give them super, any number of complexes, right? I mean, who can begin to decide what kind of trauma that puts on them?
Well, I mean, there's clearly a lot of trauma associated with him and that family. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if he needs any more trauma than he's already got.
But I mean, like you said, it is a skill. Do you think that it actually has the recipient? Does it actually have an impact? I mean, we joke about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it destroyed Jeb Bush. It destroyed him psychically. That Trump affixed the words "low energy" to him, and I mean, I've never seen anything like it. That people, it's like when you're in middle school, and he's like low energy Jeb, and then everybody's like, hey, low energy Jeb, fucking low energy Jeb, look at low energy Jeb over here. It's like, and somehow it affects people. Somehow it really got under his skin.
Is that the standard for the Biden administration? It's like, listen, whatever you do, just don't end up on a next door post. Like, let's just, like, that's got to be our response.
Yes, I mean, I think the only thing you can do is ignore it. I think that's the only thing you can do.
Well, that's what he's doing. I mean, clearly. I mean, and listen, Trump is absolutely taunting him, right? Like he's trying to say he's got dementia. And then, by the way, person, woman, man, camera, TV, like that's his response. But the cognitive test, like, I mean, his response, it's actually working so well that I think Trump is on his offensive is to be defensive. I don't think he necessarily even realizes it, that he goes on there and gives an interview and talks about how swimmingly he did on a cognitive test, which is, that's like, I'm trying to think of a parallel. That's like saying I'm the best breather. Like I do amazing at breathing. My blood oxygen is perfect.
I don't even need to remember to breathe. I just do it.
It's an involuntary reflex. I don't die because I mean, Jesus Christ, can we set the bar any lower? Like that's the bar for our president. He can pass a cognitive test.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the answer is yes. That is
yes, the there is yes. It's so you basically, if Trump loses, you see that maybe he'll do what he always wanted to do, which was start a network, right? Wasn't that his whole shtick going to 2016? He just wanted to have a competing network to Fox, and maybe he has that.
He'll get a group of investors, they'll buy OAN, and they'll just make it, the official network for white supremacists.
So it'll be basically QVC for Trump properties and neo-Nazis.
Emphasis on the Q, yes.
On the Q. What do you think about that, by the way, that Twitter banned? Is that a good thing?
I mean, my feed it was swamped by them.
Yeah.
All day, every day.
No. Okay.
Attack.
Clearly awful people. Clearly. But would you say that there's a level of mental illness that also goes hand in hand with them? I mean, it seems like these are not well rational or logical people for the most part.
Well, I'm always hesitant to ascribe mental illness to bad behavior.
Yes, that's a fair point.
Because I think there's a lot of people who want to believe the worst about everybody, and if that means that they can believe that you eat babies in the basement of pizza places, then that's what they're going to believe. because I think it makes them feel morally superior, where they can go, well, I don't eat babies at the basement of pizza places. I'm the better person than that guy.
You know what always what always frustrates me to no end about those kind of conversations is that their approach is, well, unless you can prove to me that you don't eat babies in the basement of pizza. So it's up to me to prove your insane theory isn't correct. The onus is on me. Thank you very much. Let me go do that. I don't like, it's an impossible thing. And they'll say, well, you can't prove it. So because you can't prove it, it must be true. Where I live here in Seattle, not far from my home, there's a man who, you pass his house, literally, Michael, he has a tree filled with crazy Q conspiracy theories on paper taped to his tree. So you can imagine what the Home Association must think about that. But to make matters worse, he actually walks around Seattle with a chicken.
Uh-huh.
He'll walk around with a chicken and yell at you about the media. And he is exactly, in real life, what you would imagine him to be if you probably saw him online. Have you actually ever run into any of these people in real life?
No, never in person.
No.
But I love the idea of a support chicken, an emotional support chicken.
Support chicken. And
you're like, myself.
I remember you like walking down the street and he'll be like, the media is terrible. And he's like shaking this chicken at you. And you're trying to understand what the symbolism, what the connection between the chicken and media is. Is the media chicken? Is the media the shaking? Like, what is it?
I think the two are separate. I really think it's an emotional support chicken.
Support chicken.
For him to have the courage to get out there and yell at you about the media, he needs to have the assurance of a chicken.
Well, I mean, I guess that chicken has its work cut out for him. Must be one hell of an emotional support chicken. And you see,
the dogs are like, dude, I'm not going out there with
that's
you.
right. The dogs.
It's too much for me.
They've written,
like, whatever,
they've
man. Whatever you
banded
need.
together. They've unionized. They've written a letter. Leave it to the chickens. Yeah, the chicken can't even lay eggs anymore. He's done. So you've never run into these kind of people in real life. You never had.
I've never met like an ardent Q person in real life.
Well, I guess I can say from my one interaction, in real life, they are exactly what you would imagine them from being online. Mm-hmm. Where do we even begin to unpack this? What should we be taking away from what's happening in Portland in a serious way?
I think in a serious way, we should be really heartened by what's going on in Portland in terms of the enthusiasm, the unrelenting nature of the protests, and the passion that they're bringing to their work. It's obviously terrifying, the response, because I do think there's a good chance that somebody's going to get hurt or killed.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be the feds.
Right.
It's also an incredibly illuminating abuse of power. That power can be abused so readily and easily, and that local jurisdictions seem to not have a lot that they can do about it, which is startling and kind of frightening. I mean, I've never seen anything like it and never expected to see anything like it. I joked on Twitter, and I had a joke in my act when Trump first got elected, that we need to be careful because pretty soon we're going to be at war with North Korea, Iran, and Chicago. And I never expected that the Chicago part of that would come true.
Right. No, it's, I mean, do you think it's the symbolism that he wants to convey of sort of blue liberal cities with those guys with those weird mustaches and everything that people in flyover states and, very deep red states and think about liberals? Is this very much a attempt at that type of imagery?
Yeah. Plus the addition of demonizing people of color.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got everything.
So is it working?
It's the perfect show for him. I think it's too early to know. Because I think it will backfire if the protests are peaceful, which by and large they had been.
Right.
And, I think it's going to be tough for even people in deep red states to see white moms getting tear gassed night after night. I think that's going to be tough for people.
So, I mean, the even more basic question I have about that is, how come there's nothing against, you can storm a state capitol armed to the teeth, and apparently that draws absolutely no response. In fact, a lot
of
the
constitutional right, Naveed.
Right, that's right.
It's your constitutional right
to storm a state
hack and storm a state capitol with all your buddies.
In fact, I think under the 2020 Trump tax plan, you could actually claim that as a deduction, right? It's actually
yeah. Well, you deduct the gas miles that it took to get there. You can deduct your ammo. You can deduct whatever liquor you got drunk on before you went to the state capitol with your long rifle, whatever you want.
Yeah, and I think actually rifles may actually be dependents. I mean, I think you can actually claim them as dependents. I mean, but all joking aside, I mean, it really has what a crazy comparison in terms of reactions, right? Like, it clearly Portland is over the top, and then you have these people that are storming capitals armed to the teeth with such. I mean, my gosh, we've been so lucky that there hasn't been something that's happening, and I think it's only a matter of time. But those are powder kegs, and yet in those cases, the police, the state police are told, and the local police are told, pull back, don't confront them. And when they do that in Portland, suddenly Trump is saying these cities are out of control. The police refuse. But when they do,
you're ignoring the danger of graffiti.
It's a gateway drug.
Typical liberal mindset that you have. You're just ignoring the graffiti.
Is
graffiti is going to get somebody killed?
Yeah, it's right. It's a gateway drug to socialism and communism, right? You start with writing graffiti on a courthouse. The next thing you know, you're dressed up as Che. I mean, isn't that like the natural progression? In fact, I think that's how he got his start. Didn't he start by spraying graffiti? Wasn't that what
he was a tagger?
He was a tagger, big tagger. I think it was just CHE. You've spoken a lot about toxic masculinity. How come in the age of this pandemic, it's not something the CDC is working on? And will Trump be tested for it at least 3 to 4 times a day?
Be tested for toxic masculinity?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like the cognitive test. He's already passed that test with flying colors. They can't believe how well he passed the test for toxic masculinity. People have never seen anything like it before. Do they, like, how when you bring your kids to the pediatrician, they get a sticker? What does he get? What does he get for when he tests positive for toxic masculinity? What do they give him? He gets the presidency. He gets the presidency. He actually got it when he went to visit his pediatrician. He gets a plane and he gets a presidency. And the nuclear codes. What is that? All joking aside, but what the hell does that say about our country? That word's supremely fucked up. All joking aside, like, we're supremely fucked up. And what's been interesting to me about the last, let's say 6 months in particular, starting with the Black Lives Matter protests and along with the pandemic and the response to all of these things, has been how illuminating it's been in terms of how deep our problems go. Our problems are foundational. And, people a lot smarter than myself have been saying that forever. But I feel like I'm starting to understand it in a way that I never really did before. I understood it analytically. I feel like I understand it instinctively now, that we are just foundationally fucked up. And I've been talking online a little bit about the idea of creating once a new administration comes in, creating a multi-year, I'm calling it a constitutional convention. The desire to get rid of monuments to Confederate generals is a nod to that the education the history of this country, the way it's taught to our kids, is not taught honestly. I mean, it just isn't. No, it's taught dishonestly. And that history, that deep, deep history, infects everything.
It does.
And I don't think we can move forward until we know where we've been and who we are. Until we have a much richer understanding of who we are for good and for bad. A reformulation of our history doesn't mean a wholesale condemnation of our history by any means, but it means thinking about it in a more nuanced, thoughtful, deeper way, in a much more inclusive way, not for the sake of political correctness, but for the sake of honesty, truthfulness, and opportunity, so that we all understand that we all have a place at this big table. We've continually, it's like computer architecture with like DOS, and I don't know much about computers, so this may be a terrible analogy, but they built DOS, and then every time it started, they wanted to make it better. Like they would keep this kernel of DOS and adding on and jerry-rigging these things and making this incredibly like cumbersome computer architecture, because it was all built on this little kernel. And our country was founded on this little kernel of property-owning white men. And we've been sort of jerry-rigging it ever since, but it's cumbersome. And we could just create a new architecture.
So we talk about truth and reconciliation commissions. So let's say 2021 comes around and the Biden administration calls you and says, Michael, we have a question for you. Impeach, imprison, deport. And we have Jared Kushner, Jack Posobiec, and Ivanka Trump. How would you move forward with that? Do you think, and look, the joke aside, how do we take Trumpists who are diehard Trumpists today, and when a new administration eventually comes on, whether it's this election or the next one, how do we bring them forward? Do we bring them forward?
I'm reluctant to say yes, because it will be such an ugly exercise. But I think you have to. I think you have to. This was the problem with the Civil War reconstruction. Nobody was kind of held to account. And so you never had the opportunity to examine the wounds. And so the wounds festered, and then you ended up where we are. I'm not saying there is a direct line from one to the other. And there's a direct line from the founding of our country to the Civil War, to Reconstruction, to here. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's all so deeply interwoven. And the Trump era is another data point in that line. And until we address it, and whether that's a Truth and Reconciliation Committee or a constitutional convention, I don't know. But it can't be show trials. It can't be like we're parading Stephen Miller in front of some tribunal if he hasn't done anything illegal. But there has to be some accountability for where we've arrived, for the purpose of, yes, punishing people who have done wrongdoing.
I have a suggestion. What if we could just put statues in some of their cities for people they hate, like RuPaul?
Just in their yards.
Yeah, just mandate that we give them statues of just like the biggest, like Nancy Pelosi statues everywhere.
John Cusack statues everywhere.
Are there any words of hope and inspiration that you want to leave with besides emotional support chickens? No.
Nope. It's a nightmare, and we just have to get through it.
Well, there we have it.